Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a really charged geopolitical theory, the Saffron Star Alliance. Now, this is a term that describes the powerful and growing strategic relationship between India and Israel. And let me tell you, there are two wildly different ways to look at this. So is this a brilliant strategic master plan for security and economic power? Or is it something much, much darker, an axis of brutality causing incredible devastation? We're going to break down both arguments and see what each one claims is really going on.
So, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll lay out the two big competing narratives. Then, we'll dig into the unified plan perspective, followed by the shadow architect's view. After that, we'll look at the hard data, the human cost, and then wrap it all up by getting to the very core of why these two sides disagreed so fundamentally. Okay, just a quick heads up before we jump in. Our goal here isn't to declare a winner or tell you what to believe. We're here to explain the arguments from our source materials, plain and simple, so you get a really clear picture of what each side is actually claiming.
All right, let's get into it. First up is what's called the unified plan perspective. This narrative paints a picture of a really deliberate, long-term master plan, one that's all about securing India's national and, crucially, its economic interests in a pretty chaotic part of the world. Now, according to this view, this alliance wasn't just born yesterday. It was built piece by piece over decades. It all starts, some say, with a strategic error way back in 1947. But the real meat of it is in the covert cooperation. You've got Israel helping out during the 1971 war, then stepping in after the 98 nuclear sanctions. And then there's the big one, the alleged joint plot in the 80s between India's R&AW and Israel's Mossad to take out Pakistan's nuclear facility at Kahuta. This is seen as the moment that really forged a deep operational trust between them, long before things were official.
And this all feeds into a really key concept, Bure Waqt Ka Dost. It's a Hindi phrase that basically means a friend in need. The idea is that Israel proved itself to be that friend for India quietly, behind the scenes, during really critical times. This built a foundation of trust that you just can't get from a formal treaty alone.
So this narrative then lays out a pretty specific four-step endgame strategy. It's a real mix of tactics. First, you squeeze Pakistan's economy using international bodies like the IMF. At the same time, you encourage internal rebellion, using what's called the Sikkim model for political integration. Then, you stretch their army thin by supporting independence movements in places like Balochistan. And finally, you use highly advanced Israeli smart weapons for surgical strikes, a kind that do damage without starting a full-blown war.
But what's the ultimate prize here? Well, according to this viewpoint, it's not just about territory. It's about the future of trade. The big goal is reclaiming Gilgit-Baltistan. Why? Because that's seen as the key to unlocking the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, or IMEC. And IMEC is designed to be a direct challenger to China's massive Belt and Road project, specifically the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC. It's an economic power play, plain and simple.
Okay, so that's one side of the coin. Now, let's flip it over and look at the second perspective, which paints a completely different and much, much darker picture of this very same alliance.
Yeah, this perspective throws the whole idea of a strategic partnership right out the window. Instead, it calls it a strategic crime that started with the forced annexation of Kashmir. It frames the alliance as this ideological monster, calling it, and this is a direct quote, a secret marriage between the architects of the Nakba, that refers to the displacement of Palestinians in 1948, and the architects of the Saffron Surge, which is a term for the rise of Hindu nationalism in India. And this narrative zeroes in on a really critical and controversial event: the death of Hemant Karkare, who was Mumbai's anti-terror chief during the 2008 Mumbai attacks. Now, here are the facts. He was, absolutely, investigating domestic Hindutva terror cells. But here's the explosive claim from this perspective. His death wasn't just a casualty of that attack. It was a strategic elimination, a targeted hit designed to bury his investigations for good. And this viewpoint argues that this wasn't just a one-off thing. It claims it's part of a whole pattern of false flags, basically manufactured crises. It alleges that major incidents like the Samjhauta Express and Gurjar train attacks were actually engineered. For what purpose? To justify the horrific 2002 Gujarat pogrom and to paint the entire Muslim minority as some kind of internal enemy. And this is where the Israeli connection comes back in, with the alleged use of surveillance tech like Pegasus and Heron drones to create what's described as a digital panopticon in Kashmir, a state of total, constant surveillance to control the population.
Okay, let's take a step back from these big, sweeping narratives for a moment and look at the undeniable reality on the ground. Because no matter which plan or plot you find more convincing, the one thing that is absolutely not up for debate is the staggering human cost of this conflict.
I mean, just look at the numbers. Since the insurgency really kicked off in 1989, the loss of life has been absolutely immense. Human rights groups and independent analysts put the total number of deaths at 70,000, or even higher. I mean, think about that. That's an entire generation just lost.
And it's not just the people we know are gone. There's also this silent, devastating tragedy of what are called enforced disappearances. We're talking about over 20,000 people, according to activist groups, who were just taken. Their families have no idea where they are or what happened to them. They're just gone, leaving this massive gaping hole of grief and uncertainty. And this discovery really just underscores the trauma. We're talking about over 6,000 unmarked and mass graves that have been found in Kashmir. And this was documented by the region's own State Human Rights Commission. For so many people, these graves are the only clue, the only physical evidence of where their disappeared loved ones might be.
And even the data itself is a battlefield. Look at the numbers. The Indian government says it's around 40 to 45,000 deaths. Sources based in Pakistan claim it's closer to 100,000, maybe more. Human Rights Watch is somewhere in the middle. This huge gap tells you that even the most basic facts of this conflict are caught up in a brutal information war.
So, how on earth do you bring these two clashing realities together? Well, you can't, really. So let's just lay out the core disagreement one last time, because we're basically talking about two completely different worlds.
And this is what it all boils down to. Is it the unified plan view, a legitimate, necessary strategy for economic and strategic security using precise military action against terrorists, or is it the shadow architect's view, a systematic protocol of brutality using state-sponsored false flags and war crimes to achieve ethnic cleansing? You see, the very same alliance, the very same events are seen through two completely, and I mean completely incompatible lenses.
And all of this leaves us with a really difficult and pretty unsettling question. In this high-stakes game of global politics, where exactly does the legitimate pursuit of national interest end, and where does an unacceptable human tragedy begin? That right there is the question at the very heart of the Saffron Star Alliance.